The streets of Kwa Thema never truly went quiet. Even at midnight, the air vibrated with the low-frequency hum of distant bass and the sharp, sporadic shouts of the weekend crowd. Ayanda sat on the edge of the porch, her back against the cool brick of the house, watching the rhythm of the neighborhood unfold. She saw the same patterns repeat every Friday. The local taverns would hit capacity, the music would peak, and then the inevitable collapse would begin. The ice would run dry, the tavern doors would swing shut, leaving a surge of hungry people wandering the dark, narrow alleys with nowhere to go. Ayanda tracked their movements. She watched them drift from the tavern entrance toward the locked gates of the corner shops, finding nothing but silence and empty streets. She counted the seconds between their arrival and their frustrated retreat. The gap was clear. The demand was loud, constant, and entirely ignored by the local vendors who preferred to sleep through the chaos. She stood up, the decision already hardening in her chest. Her mother gripped the edge of the kitchen table, looking at the R200 note, then at the unwavering focus in her daughter's eyes. She released the money. Ayanda did not hesitate. She walked to the wholesaler, aisles blurring as she calculated margins. She returned with 2 bags of ice, raw chicken, spicy achar, and fresh rolls. At the gate, she unfolded her table and pinned a hand-drawn sign to the front. Neighbors walked past, casting sideways glances and sharp, mocking laughter. They called her a child playing shopkeeper, but she kept her eyes on the dark, empty street. Midnight struck. The tavern music swelled, vibrating the very ground. A man stumbled toward her, clutching an empty cooler, his eyes wide with desperation. "Do you have ice?" he asked. Ayanda handed him a bag and took his money without a word. The smell of frying chicken hit the air, drawing a line that snaked into the shadows. By 3 a.m., the table was stripped bare. She sat on the porch, counting the cash. R780. She had cleared R400 in one night, a sum that dwarfed her mother's weekly wage. She did not look at the tavern or the crowd. She looked at the empty table, already planning the next inventory cycle. The next Friday, the stall grew. Ayanda added boerewors and chips to the menu, the scent of searing meat drawing a larger, more aggressive crowd. By the 3rd week, she invested in a professional cooler box and a second folding table. She hired her cousin to manage the grill, freeing her hands to handle the accounts and the constant flow of cash. But as the money piled up, the atmosphere in the street curdled. The laughter that once followed her had vanished, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence whenever she walked past the local groups. Whispers followed her like smoke. Some claimed she had found a secret benefactor to fund her rise. Others suggested she was selling more than just food, their eyes tracing her movements with a sharp, predatory curiosity. Ayanda kept her head down, her mind locked on the inventory cycle. She walked past the groups of men leaning against the walls, their voices dropping to a low hum as she approached. She felt the weight of their stares on her back, a cold pressure that made the air feel thin. She did not stop to explain. She did not look up to challenge them. She reached the gate, unlocked the padlock, and focused entirely on the steel and wood of her stall. She was building a wall of work to keep the noise of the street at bay, but the shadows were growing longer. The humid air hung heavy over the stall. Ayanda moved with practiced efficiency, her hands counting notes while her cousin flipped meat on the grill. The usual crowd of onlookers stood back, their whispers dying out as a dark vehicle rolled slowly to the curb. The engine cut out, leaving a sudden, ringing silence in the street. A man stepped out. He did not rush. He leaned against the gate, his eyes tracking the organized chaos of the stall for 20 full minutes. Ayanda felt the shift in the air. She stopped counting, her fingers tightening around the stack of cash. The man stepped forward, his presence forcing the remaining customers to clear a path. "Ntombazane," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You are thinking too small." Ayanda looked up. Her hands were steady, but her pulse hammered against her ribs. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. For what? She asked. He gestured with a slow, deliberate sweep of his hand toward the empty, overgrown lot across the street. For a container shop. Ayanda did not sleep. The street noise faded into a dull, rhythmic thrum against the window, but her mind was elsewhere. She sat at the kitchen table, the surface cleared of everything but a single notebook and a pen. She pushed aside the memory of the stall, the folding tables, and the small-scale hustle that had defined her year. She focused on the empty lot across the street. Her pen moved, scratching lines into the paper, mapping out the dimensions of a steel container shop. She drew the layout, the flow of the grill, the storage for the ice, and the path for the customers. Every stroke of the pen was a rejection of the small life she had been living. She was no longer just a girl selling food on a corner. She was designing a business. She took a deep breath, dipped her pen, and began to draft the formal business proposal.